Chris Eubanks Jr. versus Conor Benn, a fight I can't wait for. And today I'm joined by the main man, True Geordie.
All right, mate.
Are you good?
I'm fucking great, mate. I'm looking forward to this one. Going to be a good chat. I mean, last time it blew away, and I've got no reason to think the next one won't be fireworks. It's going to be a great fight.
I can't wait. I feel as if people have been sleeping on this fight. Like, for me, I'm so excited for it because the first fight, it was absolutely amazing. It had everything from the build-up, the egg slap, the mind games from Chris Eubanks Jr.,
Do you know what I
the
think it is,
family
though?
rivalry.
I think boxing generally has gone a little bit quiet this summer, and coming out of it, like we've got quite a lot coming up. Like you've got Moses fighting soon, you've got Teofimo Lopez, Shakur Stevenson, and obviously next week we're in Saudi Arabia for Yard Benavidez. So like I think it's because everything just went a bit quiet for a bit, but it's going to kick off now.
Yeah, well, it's a fight I can't wait for. So, what's your initial thoughts? What have you got? Any? Obviously, we watched the face off recently. What was your takes from that?
The face-off, I thought, yeah, like Conor Benn is still a lunatic, but equally, he's looking a little more comfortable. Like he's not going to have a personality transplant. People are saying, "Oh, he needs to be completely calm." Yeah, in an ideal world, but that's just not realistic, is it? So I think he looked a bit more accustomed to what Eubank was going to bring to the table. And I do worry about the level of aggression he shows at times in the chat, but I think this can only benefit him. The experience last time, it can only help him because people forget, like, he'd never done big fights before the way Eubank had. He'd never been the main man and main event. He'd never walked out in front of that level of stadium the way Eubank has walked out to a lot of big arenas. So, and the break from being out of the ring, I think that this is going to benefit him. And I think he fought so badly strategically wise in the first fight. It might not be enough. It probably won't. Who knows? But because he is so much smaller, in my opinion. But it can only bring out a better version of Conor Benn this fight, in my opinion.
Well, I loved it because the personality clash, this is what makes it so exciting. And Conor is super aggressive, but that part of his personality is part of his fighting style.
Yeah.
So realistically, he can't just change. I don't think it'll help him because if he tries to be the thinking fighter and tries to outbox Chris, that's equally not going to work. It's about just harnessing that aggression that he's got, using that style and kind of, with a little bit of tactics, because the rawness is what made him effective and caught Chris off guard, especially early in the fight. It was the second half of the fight where Chris, with experience, he was able to adapt, make adjustments. But if we can get that first 6 rounds of Conor in just with a little bit more intelligence, basically, and just, rein it in a little bit, I think he's got a really good chance. I certainly don't think he should be changing massively. And what's your thoughts with people saying he should have went a different route, went for world titles?
I think when you've had this long out the ring, you need to pay the bills, and I think this is a fight that will pay the bills more than any other fight you'll ever have in his career, depending if he gets a Ryan Garcia fight maybe or someone like that, and he can do that. That's the actual thing. Conor Benn's options are far greater than Chris Eubank's because the reality of it is, in my opinion, Chris Eubank isn't actually good enough to step foot in the ring with the other big fighters at his own weight class around that. The big names, he can't be fucking with them. He's been destroyed by way worse fighters than the top lads at that level. This is where I've got to give Conor Benn credit. I think he's actually a higher ranked fighter generally, even after losing to Eubank, than Chris Eubank is in his own weight class. Like I think that Eubank might get one of those fights, but he'll be absolutely fucking have the floor mopped with him, in my opinion, when he's in there. Because the fact that he had such a hard time with Conor Benn should tell everyone, he was about a stone heavier than there. In my opinion, the real level of Chris Eubank. And I think for this fight, Eddie Hearn's been saying this might be Chris's last fight. I don't think it will be. I think Chris he'll want to get the money in, and maybe we might see a Canelo fight. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because it makes sense. I mean, as a fighter, if I was, offered that type of money to fight, Chris Eubanks Jr., it's an absolute no-brainer. So as much as people think, what's the point? Money talks. It's a prize fight in sport.
More than double the money, innit? It's more than double he'd get for a world title fight. But at least the world title's there for him afterwards.
Well, that's the thing. Say for Chris, if he loses, it's not great for him. But for Conor, being at a weight that he's not actually competing at, it's a win-win. He's going to get the money, even if he loses again. people won't think anything of it because straight away they'll say he was fighting a smaller man, a bigger man, more experienced. It's an absolute win-win. And I'm not sure at this point, though, to be totally honest, if Conor's ready for the world stage. I'm not too sure if he is world level yet. The experience he's going to gain from having these fights with Chris is going to set him up for them, that next level. That's the main thing.
Yeah, skill-wise, I am not sure either. I think there's some really hard matchups for him, skill-wise.
Yeah.
But the one thing that he does is, if you can, we all admit, right? Chris Eubank, yes, the rehydration clause was there, but the point of the fact of the matter is, Chris Eubank has had fought at 160 plenty of times. He's always had a good chin. And he got rocked to his boots a couple of times by Conor Benn. So that power is real. I know people have said, oh, well, he couldn't knock him out after he'd done the drug testing. I think he really was close to really hurting him there a couple of times. And his lack of tactics affected that. But if you can hurt Chris Eubank at 160 when you're a natural 147 fighter, maybe he'd even be able to get down even lower than that if he really tried. He's so small. You're going to really fucking hurt these kids at 147, in my opinion. And with a Devin Haney, for example, who's shown, yes, he's a very technically gifted fighter, but can he take it when it gets rough? I think he could have really competitive fights at that weight class after this.
And if you think about it, I mean, people might disagree here, but Chris Eubanks Jr. was once upon a time, world level fighter. Yes, he lost when he did fight for that, at that level. But every time he competed, he was never just, battered. Yeah, he maybe outboxed, but he was in those fights, very competitive. He's hard as nails. So if you look at it like that, the only thing I will kind of say, I know myself, sometimes fighting smaller men is far harder than fighting people your own weight because of the speed difference. And I think in that first fight, I think the speed difference was a massive factor. The simple fact was the tactics were absolutely all wrong. He was throwing punches from miles out of range. And then, he was so adamant to try to get the knockout. It was all just pure emotion. Yeah. It was big singles.
He wasn't worse, the punches. It was so bad. Like, looking back at it, it's mad he had the level of success he did, because I watch it and I go, you're telegraphing, your feints are very predictable, you're throwing from a mile out, like you're not setting anything up. Like he couldn't have looked worse, and yet he still had a lot of success. That's where I'm like, all right, all the main physical advantages are with Eubank and the experiences with Eubank, and he did figure them out as the fight went on. And as Ben's speed diminished through the early rounds, you seen Eubank just took over. But equally, early on, if, as you've said, if you can, he's got a good fucking jab, Conor Benn, actually. When he fucking uses it,
you're 100% there.
It was fucking good. And if you actually think about your range and just step in and edge in and wait and maybe wait for him to go first instead of you always going first and try and counter him a little bit, think about what you're doing a bit more. It doesn't require like a whole change of personality, a whole change of who you are as a fighter. Just think a little bit more, and you could get him out of there potentially.
Yeah, you're totally right, because I've done a video on this, like breaking down some, tactics that he needs to employ, but none of the tactics were game changing. They were just small adjustments, very small adjustments. I think I had about 5 different tactical things he needs to do. If he implements only 2 of them, like you said there, judging the distance better, just edging it to range that little bit, because every time he threw his punches, it was from a mile away. And, at times he was still catching Chris. So if he can edge in and use his jab, like you just said there before, because his jab, he's got the faster hands. And, when you're coming from a low, shooting up with a jab, he was getting success. But, especially in that second half of the fight, it was non-existent. He just didn't use it. And I just remember one time in the fight, he threw this right hand from one side of the ring. It was like he was throwing a cricket ball. It was ridiculous. It was absolutely, mental, really. But he did get success.
Like a fighter? Didn't he look like a fighter who hadn't fought in fucking ages? Like the early rounds where he's just swinging, like he's there's no balance there. He's fucking all over the shop. I'm like, have you been sparring? Like, you don't even look like you've been sparring.
Yeah, it was mental, but unfortunately, with he's got that personality where the whole world's against him. So he was kind of had all that built-up emotion from the egg slap, getting called a drugs cheat, which is his own fault. All these different scenarios during the build-up where Chris basically got underneath his skin. And the minute that bell went, it just all got released, and there was no controlling it.
I've got to give credit to Chris for the mind games, because
mastery.
It did work. Another thing that kind of plays in Ben's favour a little bit, and don't get me wrong, I still think Eubank should be favourite, but all of the things, the eggs surprise, the Eubank Senior showing up surprise, all of those little things that impacted his frame of mind going into that will not
Yeah,
be there this time. The first
yeah,
time you've ever fought in that big stadium, it must have been fucking anxiety levels for him, for a lad who has never really done it anywhere near that level. So there's going to be a much more focused version of him. So if he still comes out and fights like a madman, you kind of can't have any sympathy because you've got a real good chance here.
yeah. Well, another point there, just talking about who will have learned more from the fight and who was dealing with more pressure going into the fight, because we kind of talk about Conor. He's never been fighting at world level. He's gone up in weight, all these different things, the mind games. But equally, Chris had been out the ring for quite a while, had inactivity. The pressure was equally on him, but he also had the weight cut, the rehydration clause. And this is it's been well documented. So for me, it's almost a level playing field in my mind. I don't believe, because everybody's got a different narrative. Is Chris more got the disadvantage? Has Conor? But it's a really difficult one. But for me, the rehydration clause is a massive factor. And I would personally rather be the guy who can put on weight, be physically strong. The thing is, you make the weight, and then you can't even fully rehydrate. To me, it's absolutely crazy. Rehydration clauses should be banned. So it's
I
really
think fights
difficult.
like this should be banned, though, full stop. Like, this fight shouldn't be happening. The only reason it is happening is because Eddie Hearn and them negotiated this rehydration clause. I think that was a make or break. The only way we're going to put our guy in there with a man who's a stone heavier, and at that level of weight class, a stone isn't like heavyweight, is it? It's a fucking...
Yeah,
We've seen, despite the rehydration clause, which I don't agree with and I don't want to say either,
yeah,
the main deciding factors on who won that fight, in my opinion, the height of Eubank, the reach of Eubank, the size of Eubank to absorb those punches. Later in the rounds, the way he was able to put all of that weight on top of Conor Benn, and he couldn't really, when they were inside, he was getting tired. Despite that, I do think the size of Eubank was an advantage. I'm not defending the rehydration clause. You talk about who's got the advantage overall. I think that Eubank seen a lot of flaws in Conor Benn when he was actually in the ring, and he actually was developing ways as the fight was going on to capitalize on that, throwing the right hand more. When Conor, he has a lot of like twitches that give away what he's going to do next as well. And I think with Bomac,
that's a
strategically,
massive factor.
yeah, Bomac's a mastermind. We know that, and the way he figured out Canelo. How could he not be able to figure out Conor Benn, really? So I think that all of the pressure is on Eubank again, because really you won last time. You've now got a chance to figure him out. You really have figured him out. And this means that in theory, and a lot of people are saying this, you should be able to get him out of there this time. If you figured him out as well as you did last time, this time it should be, providing you just get through those early rounds, a shorter night.
Yeah, it is. It is a real difficult one because I personally think, the best chance that Conor had to beat Chris was the first time round, because forgetting all the inexperiences, that I really think the weight factor was a massive thing. I think that was a bigger disadvantage, Chris had, in my opinion. But I also think that he totally underestimated Conor the first time round. He was saying, I only need to be at 60%. Whereas now, he's had more time to prepare, get to the weight, all the mistakes he would have made cutting weight, hopefully he's addressed. And like you say, he's now got more back on Bomac, sorry. Yeah. He's now got Bomac's trainer.
He looks good as well, doesn't he? Have you seen him in the picture? Eubank looks better this time. He looks really shredded, but not unhealthy, scary shredded.
Yeah, the first time round, he just looked unhealthy. He looked like he'd literally, just cut a load of water. He looks way better this time round. And like you've just said, Chris seen all the different flaws that Conor had. And I just think he's a smarter fighter and he should be able to go in there and make those adjustments.
And he's got the reach and the height and those advantages to make it pay. Like, Conor has to come to him. You're in the driver's seat from the, you know more than anyone, Loz. You've jabbed people's heads off for years. Like, when they have to come to you and you've got the longer reach, you've got the jab. I mean, you've got a direct line to victory there, as long as you don't fuck it up for yourself. So, yeah especially with Bomac.
Yeah, well, let's can we talk about predictions?
Go for it, mate. What are you saying?
I'm saying a late stoppage. I really think, like you say, Chris should have the experience, and he's now took that data from the first fight. If he doesn't get him out of there, I think it's going to kind of look bad in my opinion, because all that extra experience, he had the winning formula first time round. If he can't take that away and do one better this time, I think it's anything less than a stoppage. I don't think it's a great look. I don't really give Conor a massive chance. I think the mind games that Chris plays, even in the face-off, we're seeing that he was still reacting to everything. He started the interview like he was all cool, calm, and collected. Chris said one thing. There was that moment in there, I think it was where Josh said to Conor, "You hurt Chris." And Chris just looked at Josh and went, "He didn't hurt me." And he didn't think it. And Conor just erupted instantly. There's no it's just like you can reel him in so easily. I just think the mind games, he just hasn't matured at all since the first fight, in my opinion.
You might be right. I guess we're only going to know when he's in there, but the mind games, even in the ring, like when he hits him and he hurts him really bad in that first fight, Eubank's sort of smiling and talking shit in his ear at the same time. I mean, fair play to him. He's got a fucking chin and he's very composed, Eubank, and that comes from years of doing a lot of fucking wars and being in some tough fights, to be fair to him. I'll do my prediction on my pain game video, but what I will say is what you've said there, that the onus on Eubank to have an even better fight for his own legacy, because people are going to say, because it kind of goes down to 147 after this, it's going to look like, you went life and death with a 147 fighter. That does impact the way people look at you, especially when at the elite level, Eubank has always struggled. The fact that you're saying that Eubank could have improved even more than Conor, I think we're going to find out so much in that first round. And Conor was saying it in that face-off, it ain't going to be a war. I'm going to systematically break you down. That he's talking like someone who's really thinking about not just chopping the tree down at the top, but coming from all angles this time and actually varying things up and keeping him guessing a bit. I'll be interested to see if he can do that when he gets hit in the face, when it gets, the first minute maybe, but when it starts getting, and then fucking Eubank's talking shit in his ear, and how composed can you be? That is going to be key for him to give himself any chance. That being said, I do think Conor Benn can knock Chris Eubank out. I think he absolutely can. But it's just got to be very well set up. Yeah.
Well, it's a fight I can't wait for. And and don't forget, we will be live with the Pain Game 22nd of this month, next week. God, I can't wait. The Pain Game's back together. Can't wait for David Benavidez versus Anthony Yard. Cannot wait.
And there's Devin Haney, Norman, Bam Rodriguez. Like, it's 4 world title fights. It's going to be a brilliant night, mate.
It's absolutely stacked. What a card. What a month, actually. Boxing's kind of took a dip the last month or so, but the end of this month, so much to look forward to. Well, anyway, thank you very much for joining me, Brian. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.